Bear Radio.
What would happen if my parents would find out that I was enjoying this forbidden touch? Am I broken? Am I supposed to be fixed in some way? And I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know what to deal with.
The third culture is what emerges at the intersection between your culture of origin and the other cultures that have shaped you. This show is a place for us to explore how our futures are actually led by what happened to us in the past, and how we know who we are and where we belong when our points of reference keep changing. These are more than conversations about Asian identity. They're portraits of whole people, what keeps them up at night, what their hearts long for, and the impact they hope to have on their communities. I'm your host, Sen Jan, a third culture kid born in China, raised in Canada, and currently based in Berlin. This series is a first step towards making peace with my own struggles as a third culture Asian, and it's my hope that anyone who's ever felt confused about who they are and where they belong will hear themselves reflected in our stories. How did growing up in a Catholic Muslim family lead to the discovery of sexual freedom for a young Indonesian woman? In episode 8, Dewi tells the story of how she discovered her bisexuality despite a strict family and societal setting, and the freedom she found upon leaving Indonesia.
As a bisexual who is also married to a man, I easily pass as straight. At the same time, also, I felt very, very afraid of having to go back to Indonesia because of my sexuality, and I feel like I'm I've gone back to the closet.
Dear listeners, before we start the show, here are some announcements. First of all, I want to apologize for completely missing my own deadline for releasing this episode. It's been a nutty couple of weeks, and here are some of the things that have held me up. An intensive German course, which took up way more time than I had anticipated, but from which I emerged much more confident using die Deutsche Sprache. Applying for a Google PRX grant that, fingers crossed, if we won, would allow us to keep focusing exclusively on bringing these stories to you. A heat wave, which is still in full swing and making my brain melt out of my ears. And last but not least, self-quarantine following a big CO-19 scare. This is actually a pretty great story involving a pastry, a bus ride to Poland, and not being able to taste things. That I'll tell you all one day. Don't worry, I'm feeling fine and just taking precautions. And now for our announcements. Beyond Asian is now a proud member of Bear Radio, Berlin's English podcasting network. You can check us out on bearradio.org, where you can find an incredible set of programming from other English podcasts based in Europe. More on this a little later. For now, let's get the show started. Dewi, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very excited to talk to you.
Dewi and I met a few years ago when we were working together, and I've heard her story before in bits and pieces, but I wanted to explore it more deeply in the context of a third cultural conversation, as well as what it means to her to be Indonesian and Asian. Dewi was born and raised in Indonesia. She moved to the Netherlands when she was 18 for university, where she met her husband, and they now live in Morocco. Dewi's had this crazy story, and I needed to know more about it. To start with, she went to an all-girls Catholic school, one of the best and most competitive, and this itself is not so unusual. What makes this a complex story is the fact that Dewi's mother is Catholic, while her father is Muslim. Indonesia is the largest Muslim nation in the world, home to 230 million Muslims, making up 87% of the population, while Catholics make up only 3%. I wanted to understand what Dewi's experience was growing up with parents from different faiths, what it was like for her to go to Catholic school in a nation that was overwhelmingly Muslim, as well as how her perspectives on herself and the world have changed after having lived in 3 culturally and linguistically distinct countries. I asked her.
So I grew up in an interfaith household. So my father is Muslim and my mother is Catholic. Me and my brothers, we grew up as Catholics because my mother, she's very devout Catholic, and she actually, before she got married with my father, she wanted my father to convert to Catholicism. In fact, he had promised that he would do that, but he never did. Growing up in this kind of household, I remember my mother secretly baptizing my brothers. My mother, of course, she was very disappointed that she's still disappointed that my father never converted to Catholicism. One thing that I remember, that I still remember very clearly, is that, my mom, my brothers, and I, we used to pretend that whenever we were about to go to church, we had to lie to our father, basically saying that, oh no, we're just going to, I don't know, go eat at a restaurant somewhere or like go shopping. And there's a lot of like sneaking around. And for example, my mom and I, we would walk to church, and then my brothers would just like take the bicycle or the scooters or something, and then we would meet at church and take different routes so that my father wouldn't find out that we were going to church together. It was very bizarre. So on the one hand, like at home, like we never really practiced like any of the typical like Catholic rituals, or we don't have like a cross like on the wall, which is great. I love it because sometimes it could be very like traumatizing having all these symbols everywhere.
When I was first listening to Dewi's story, I didn't give much thought to the fact that Dewi was regularly asked as a child to lie to one of her parents, because I myself as a child was often asked to bend or omit the truth in order to keep the peace at home. I didn't even realize how strange it was to be lying to your family because, let's face it, those of us who have grown up in strict traditional households have all needed to get very good at lying. I myself used to lie all the time about innocuous things. If I had practiced piano that day, no, I had not. If I had scored less than 90% on a test, Asian fail is a real thing, and what time I'd gone to bed. Far later than you really want to know, and I still do it. I lied about these things because, despite what I was learning at Western school, the reality at home was that truth was less valuable than harmony, or at least the semblance of harmony. It was more important how things appeared to be than how they really were. So the bizarreness of Dewi's family all going to church behind their father's back at first didn't actually seem that bizarre to me. I could easily see my own family orchestrating something like that. It was only when I passed this episode on for feedback that it was pointed out to me. It was a how does a fish describe water moment. And this got me thinking, how many things my guests have told me that may seem just normal to me and not even worth pointing out, and how much I've internalized some of these things as just how families work. Now, for Dewi, just living with a Catholic mother and a Muslim father at home was tough enough. But daily life was made even harder because of the draconian policies at school, with students spending their days in fear of punishment. Although the Catholic school system was difficult, what made it easier was a relationship Dewi found in a friend who became more. Was there anything that stood out to you in this time that you spent at the Catholic school? Like, were there any experiences that were really memorable, or that you can say, that was a formative thing that changed me?
Yeah, definitely. I remember when I was 15, I had like a number of close friends. But there was like one girl whom I was very close with, and I don't know what made us very close to one another, but I think we were both sort of broken inside in one way or another. Like maybe because at the time I was also struggling with just being in this interfaith household. And at the time, of course, I considered myself quite like a religious, like, quite a devout Catholic. So at the time I was struggling a lot with the fact that my father was not very accepting of us being Catholics. Yeah, so I guess that sort of made me feel dependent on, the person that I was very close with, and her name was Lydia. So yeah, we were very close, and at a certain point, our relationship was just getting like more and more intense. And I remember we started having like, sleepovers, and we would, have like late night phone calls, like talk for hours and stay up all night and listen to music. And we also shared, the same taste of music at the time, and studied together, and, would have lunch together at school. Yeah. And then I guess like during those late night phone calls, especially, that's, I think, the moment when we started really opening up to one another emotionally. And also, we just, I guess kind of shared this sense of like brokenness or something. I don't know, it was very strange in that period, but anyway, at a certain point she was at my place. We were having like a sleepover, and this particular sleepover was actually with another friend of ours, so it was the three of us. Yeah, we watched movies, and we had snacks, and just like ordered like McDonald's deliveries and things like that. Yeah, after the movies and the hamburgers, we started like feeling sleepy, right? And it was already like 3 a.m. or so. And our third friend, she was already asleep. So it was only me and Lydia. And we were just like lying down and, like under the covers. And yeah, and then I remember at the time, like I was just trying to fall asleep, I think, but I was like having like some difficulty breathing or something. And I was, kind of having like a chest pain. And I was telling Lydia that, I was having a little bit of like a pain in my chest, and then she touched me, she put her hand on on my chest, right? And then her hand moved to like my breast, and then after that, she kind of like her hand would slid under my t-shirt, and then she would actually like just like hold me on like one of my breasts, like that one particular touch. I don't know, in my head, like it just gave me all these like sensations, but also at the time I suddenly realized that, oh shit, like from this point on, like I'm going to be a different person. Everything is going to change after this. It was in my bedroom at my parents' house, right? So my parents were just like a few meters away. And at the time I was like thinking, holy shit, like what would happen if my friend, like our third friend, would wake up, or even worse, if my parents would find out that I was enjoying this sort of forbidden kind of touch from Lydia. So that happened, and I couldn't really stop thinking about it for a while. But also, we became closer and closer. And then during our next sleepover, I was at her place, and this time it was only the two of us. I had not really developed any kind of like sexual feelings or curiosity at the time, like after she touched my breast. I just, started thinking about it, but it didn't necessarily turn me on or arouse me in a significant way. So I went to her place, and, we were just again watching movies and just having fun. And it was during the day, and I suddenly fell asleep. Like you just, sometimes it happens, right? Like you're just lying watching movies, and you fall asleep into like a kind of like a daytime nap. And all of a sudden I felt like Lydia was like, she started kissing me, like, and at the time, like, I was asleep or half asleep, and I couldn't tell if it was really real or not. And but I could really feel like, like I was making out, like, and that I was being, like, my lips were like being active. Like it was kind of like a strange, trippy feeling. Yeah, and then we stopped, but I was still asleep. I think a minute later or so I woke up. Yeah, and then we talked about it just a little bit. Like we looked at each other and we were like, yeah, what just happened? And from that point, we didn't really say anything to one another. We just started making out again, and then took it further and further. And yeah, one thing led to another, and then we started having sex. And I think after that sleepover, we sort of subconsciously like started like a relationship. At school, we would like make appointments to go to the bathroom together, and would just yeah, do our thing in the bathroom. And it was difficult because we couldn't tell anybody, and because we couldn't tell anybody, I felt like we became very dependent on one another, and very possessive, and easily jealous of what the other person was doing. And
Other friends, going over to other people's houses.
yeah, exactly. And it was quite intense in terms of course, you experience all these new sensations, right? Like, it was also accompanied by all these guilty feelings, right? Like we both knew that we were not supposed to be doing this. Like it's already taboo to have sex outside marriage, like with a guy, as like a heterosexual couple or something, like let alone like wanting to have sex with other women. Yeah, and so that was quite challenging. And I remember after several months, 3 or 4 months or so, Lydia started to worry that people would find out about us. So she started like, I don't know, like kind of shifting away. Can you say that? Like sort of, she started stepping back and creating this distance between us. That was very difficult for me.